Welcome to the Needy and Normal podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Levering, mom, wife, and life coach. After hours of coaching and learning from my own life, one thing is clear: meeting your needs is essential for a better life. Here, we'll talk about your needs and not only learn to accept them, but also tend to them without guilt. Let's get needy. Hey, how are you doing? Are you in your car? Are you at home? Where are you right now? Are you able to focus on this one? Because this one, everyone needs. I say that about every episode, but truly, this episode is about self-discovery and knowing yourself. And the reason I've chosen this topic for the podcast today is because this is something that comes up in sessions with clients of mine as like the original reason. Sometimes people don't even realize this is why they've come to see me, or why they're at a crossroads in their life, or why they're at a decision-making time in their life, or why things all of a sudden just don't feel the same anymore. And easy, simple answer is that things change. People change. We grow. But there is consistency in who you are. There is always your beliefs and your core values. I think I've talked about this before on the podcast, but when there is a set system deep inside of you that you've attached to over the years, that doesn't necessarily waver. So oftentimes we steer away from our true selves. And it's not until we've experienced a lot of life and a lot of wrong that we realize where we want our life to go and what is right for us. When I was living in Missouri, Springfield, Missouri, I had a job with the National MS Society. I've talked about this before. It is also in my profile section on my website at ablifecoaching.com. But when I was there, I absolutely fell in love with the busy. I was an event planner and a fundraiser, and it was really busy, and it was hard work, and there was very few people to tackle large jobs. And by few, I mean literally 3 of us. And we had help from volunteers, but we were a branch office, right? So we had to do so many of these large scale events with resources and some help and tech support and such, but with very little help. We were very hands-on. We were very engaged with our community and our volunteers and the planning, and we had to do so much work ourselves. And I fell in love with it. It was so hard and so much and exhausting and stressful and all those things. But if you are a high achiever, you understand this. When you put your heart and soul into something and then you see the outcome, it is everything, right? It's why we work hard for whatever it is we want in life, whether it's our careers or our family or our relationships. You know, when we really want something and we want to see it be successful and we want that good feeling, we thrive on that. We love that. And I did. I was into it. And when I was there, I had a fantastic boss and mentor. She taught me the ropes, the ways, the ins, the outs, how to do my job, how to do it well. And she also taught me some amazing lessons on how to go with the flow. And she would say all the time, bless it and release it, bless and release, you know, or teachable moments. Those were like her greatest, easiest go-tos she would throw my way. She would say, well, bless and release it. If I was trying to solve a problem or trying to make plans and things were just tricky, either bless it and release it, or it's a teachable moment. And I still hang on to that to this day. And so many other moments and so many nuggets that I took from this amazing woman. Her name was Debbie, and I say was because unfortunately we lost her to cancer. This is important in the story because I loved the work, I loved what I was doing, but I loved my mentorship and I loved my mentor. When we were in Springfield, that was the first time I had moved away completely and totally on my own, besides my husband, who at the time was my boyfriend, right? We moved there before we got married, and I felt really out of my element. And so this was my second job after we moved there, but when I got this job, I finally felt like I was a part of something. The last episode about belonging, I kind of mentioned this, but I finally felt like I was a part of something, and I felt like I was someone's, right? Debbie had taken me under her wing and really showed me how to do hard things and be proud of myself and also be kind to myself and take breaks and do what I needed to do. And if something didn't work, find another way or let it go. And it was such an amazing lesson in working with her. But I was really taken by her. Like, I wanted to be her little shadow because I was always learning something and I always felt so safe and comfortable. And I mentioned her passing away after we moved is when this happened. And it was so hard. I got so attached to her as a work companion and part of my community and belonging to the job, right? But she became such a good friend and someone that I really looked up to and someone that I felt like I needed in my life. And so when she passed away, I was trying to figure out my life, trying to figure out my career. At the time that cancer took her away at 50 years old, we were living in Wisconsin already, and I was a new mom. And before Debbie died, I talked about her all the time. I thought about her all the time. I remembered so many things that I had learned from her. I think she was probably one of the biggest reasons why I loved that job. I had to really think hard about my experience with the MS Society because I also had almost, I think it was about a year's worth as the same position in a different branch in Massachusetts when we lived there for a short time before we had our son and moved to Wisconsin. And while I was there, I really lost my mojo. One of the reasons was because, which I found out later, was that I was way more interested in the people than I was in the work. I was interested in helping them and do the work for them, but I was way more interested in listening to their stories and being there for them, which was part of the reason why I became a coach. And that was starting to really develop in Massachusetts when I was there. And so by the time we were in Wisconsin, and I was at that crossroad of, do I go back to work full time and do the full time working / mom life, or do I try the stay at home mom thing because I could? We could have made it, we were going to make it work. And I was really, really torn. I was really having a hard time with it. And what I realized was when Debbie passed away, I really came to terms with how I felt about the work because she was such a huge part of my experience in the first job at the MS Society. I realized that that was why my second experience at a different branch with the MS Society was different. My passion was different. My drive was different. Not that I didn't have another fantastic boss, because I did. She was amazing, and we also became friends. But it was different. There was something missing. I felt isolated when I lived there anyways, especially when I stopped working and had a very short stint of just being home with a baby. But something died. I know that sounds crazy because I'm talking about losing someone who meant a lot to me, but something died in me as far as that career goes. I realized that Debbie was so much of the reason why I loved that job. I had fallen in love with talking to people and listening to people. My motivation the second round wasn't really there. So when I got to the point of, do I want this job anymore? I really had to reflect. And my passion towards the work had faded, had died. It did. I wanted to shift gears. I didn't exactly know what that looked like. And the push I got that I used to be confused about, but the push I got was actually from family who said, why don't you try the stay-at-home mom thing? At first, I was very resistant, but then I realized that I was in a place where I needed to make different decisions because I wasn't sure that that was the work I wanted to do anymore. I didn't have the urge. I didn't have the motivation. It wasn't exciting to me. And so I needed to change something. And going into full-time stay-at-home motherhood was not the thing. But it did teach me a huge lesson about myself, because here's the thing about knowing yourself, and here's the thing about steering yourself. You do have to know what you're not into. You do have to know what doesn't work, and you do have to discover what you don't like. When you realize, as far as a career goes, relationships too, but when you think about what isn't for you, you can better clarify with yourself what is for you. So when I admitted to myself that, okay, the stay-at-home mom thing, the like 24/7 mom thing is overwhelming, it's too much for me. I totally admit that. I'm going to do an episode about motherhood, I promise. It was not for me. And that was hard for me to admit, because I felt like I had this obligation to our life in a different way. I wasn't going to work and making an income, so I needed to throw myself into motherhood, and it was too much, and it wasn't for me. I needed balance. I needed something else, but it took me a long time to figure it out. Now, if you followed along for a little bit, you know this. What I remember about this self-discovery was knowing, with a little guilt at first, knowing that I didn't want to be an event planner and a fundraiser anymore, but I did know that I like helping people. I like volunteering. I like being of service, but I didn't want to do it in that way. So I admitted that to myself. I don't think that's where it's at anymore. And part of it was because I didn't have Debbie anymore. I'm not going to lie. People can really make your environment for you when you're at work. This is an argument I see all the time, all over LinkedIn and the internet. My dad, who's a corporate lawyer, is so funny. He's all into this stuff now, and he sends me these articles all the time that you may love what you do and not love who you work with, and vice versa. You may love who you work with and not love what you do. I experienced that. I loved who I worked with. I had great people around me, but I wasn't in love with what I was doing anymore. When I admitted that to myself, it gave me a big dose of clarity, right? So I could at least know what road I'm not going down. Then I also admitted to myself, as our daughter was born, again, if you've been following along, you know this part of my journey. I got to a point after my daughter where being a full-time stay-at-home mom was just not for me. I needed something more. And that is something that's very hard for moms to say, and it shouldn't be, because the thing is, self-discovery and figuring out who you are and what you want matters outside of all the people involved in your life. You as an individual, what you need and what you want matters. And I'm no less of a mother for wanting to do other things with my life. I am no less of a career woman for changing careers. You're just figuring yourself out. You're learning about yourself. You're growing. You're supposed to. That is so important. So when you discard, when you shed yourself of the things that are no longer serving you, you open yourself up to what will serve you and what will work for you. I'm thinking of this in more terms of a career, but this is also relationships, with friendships or romantic, working relationships, whatever it might be. When you figure out what's not working, it's just easier to figure out what will. The other thing you can bank on is what really, really matters to you, right? If we go back to the basics, our core values, what really matters to us, if we really follow them in who we surround ourselves with, the jobs we choose, it steers you in the right direction, because your core values, right, the things that really, really matter to you are needs. At the end of the day, they're things you need to thrive and to live a full life. And so when you can tune into that, they can help you steer. And they can also help you figure out what's not meant for you and what doesn't feel right to you. When I'm coaching, a lot of times what comes up is the saying yes versus saying no. Yeah, in the boundaries area, right? If things come up, you can say no, you can say yes. Also, to yourself. If things come up that you have gravitated towards in the past because it became a comfortable discomfort, then things get a little fuzzy. But the problem is we will tell our intuitions to quiet down. Let me explain that a little clearer. So if something comes up and let's say an opportunity comes up and our inclination is to be like, okay, well, I have to say yes because it's what I do. It's what I've done. It's who I am. It's who I've been. And we go and do the thing and then it feels not right, but that's just what we're used to. That's living in the discomfort. And it's so easy to get comfortable with the uncomfortable that when we choose to say no to a thing that actually isn't for us anymore, it feels worse. But it's so much worse to stay in the discomfort, to stay in something that isn't for you, than it is to peel away and try something that feels more for you. I was thinking about dreams the other day. Like I have a dream to open a coffee shop, or I have a dream to be a superstar in a movie, whatever the dream may be. We're so good at telling ourselves that's not sensible, that's not realistic, that's not what my parents did. We're so good at talking ourselves out of things that we actually feel connected to because they feel so big. So, opposite of saying no, obviously saying yes. So, saying yes to yourself, following your gut instincts, following your intuition, following your passion, actually being led to the thing you want to do, even if it's scary, it takes some bravery. I get it. But isn't it better to be brave towards the thing that scares you than to be too scared to leave something that holds you back from your true self and what you're truly meant to do? There's a guy in my workout class. Always we end up next to each other. And there was one day we started talking about taking time off of work or something like that. And he had mentioned he was on a sabbatical. And so my curious brain, I always want to know about people. Finally, we finished up a workout once and I was like, hey, just curious, what do you do that you're on a sabbatical? And he said, well, I was a corrections officer for 30 years and I decided he books music. He books bands for events and stuff. And I said, whoa, that's like a totally huge change. He goes, yeah, I can't even believe I'm doing it. It's a dream of mine. It's been my dream forever, and I'm finally doing it. And I thought to myself, how cool. It's never too late, by the way. How cool that he's doing something drastically different. And he's so happy because it's meant for him. He feels it in his bones. You could just tell by the way he lit up talking about it that it was meant for him. And by the way he mentioned how long it took him to get to it, tells me, because that's what you do as a coach, you read between the words, tells me that he was afraid to take the leap for a really long time, or he felt so obligated to the job that he had committed to that he didn't feel like it was real. But he made it a reality. I'm telling you, when you say yes and you give it a go, you could absolutely surprise yourself and realize, oh man, I actually am capable of making a total huge change. Because if you don't know this already, much of my work is helping people with career changes. Adding a side gig perhaps to the job that they have, or completely going to something brand new. It might just be a job change, but often I talk to people who completely change their careers because what happens is they've said yes to the wrong thing for so long that they're ready to say yes to the right thing. Now, like I said, it's not too late. It's never too late. But if you could just pause just for a moment, just with me right now, just take a big deep breath and think about it. Are you where you're meant to be? Based on your intuition and your passion and being led by your own gut instincts? Or are you where you think you're supposed to be based on society or family influence, or because you're good at something so you might as well do it? Where do you kind of live in that neighborhood? And how often do you say no to things that could be something versus saying yes to something that might feel scary but also might be more fit for you? So you have to try things. You do. Nothing changes if you don't take action. That may sound like the simplest, duh, but it's true. Nothing will change if you don't take action. For example, if you're like my workout buddy Steve, and you've been a corrections officer for 30 years, and now you want to book music, you want to book bands, you have to give it a try. I'm sure, and I don't know his whole story, believe me. Tune back in. Maybe I'll get more of the story. But maybe he dipped his toe in. Maybe he booked a band for a company. Maybe he did it for a family reunion. Maybe he just gave it a go. I mean, you have to fall in love with the things you're into somehow. And then it just grew because he liked it and it felt right. And I'm telling you, just like the purpose of this podcast, when you tend to your needs, life gets better. Your need to be yourself and live authentically by what you're drawn to and what makes sense to you makes your life better. You can just completely and utterly thrive when you are led by something you want to do. There's so many successful people out there who will tell you when you do something you love and you're relentless about it, it will pay off. And it's really hard to believe in that because a lot of times things that we're drawn to and want to do feel unrealistic. And it feels like, wow, if I ever go for that, oh, it's going to be so much hard work. I'm not going to have enough money. And we're so good at talking ourselves out of it. Am I right? I mean, part of what we're doing here on this planet is figuring out what our purpose is. You've thought of it. I'm sure you have. That's partly why you're here. What is my purpose? What am I doing? How am I supposed to live my best life? What can that look like? I mean, we ask ourselves these questions in so many ways all the time, especially if you're interested and in tune with personal development and trying to find meaning in your own life. We are actively searching for our purpose. And even someone who's on autopilot and gets up, has their breakfast, goes to work, comes home, does the thing. And that happens to so many people. Even those people, and maybe this is you. Maybe autopilot got real boring and you realize like, oh shit, what am I doing? Everyone has that moment, okay? Some people it happens to when they're younger and they want to figure it out sooner than later. And even so, things could change and that's fine. But you can still be you along the way, even if things change and you grow. And then other people, it doesn't happen until they're 50. It doesn't happen until they're 70. Your dream doesn't have to die. It just doesn't. You can still stay very true to yourself. So when you're trying to discover what is for me, what is my purpose, what am I doing here? Is this job right for me? Is this person right for my life in a relationship? If you're trying to have those discoveries, if you're trying to understand who am I, what is authentic about me, then go back to the roots. Go back to what makes you you. Go do a core value search and discover what speaks to you. If you go back and find, let's just say the top 5 core values, things that really make you tick, then you can do a bit of a checklist to see like, okay, where do these show up in my life? Where am I honoring myself in these ways? Who is in my life that helps me stay in touch with this core value? For example, kindness. Kindness for me shows up in my motherhood all the time. I absolutely can't stand it when my kids fight, not because I don't understand that's normal. I get that. They're children, they're going to fight. Kindness really, really, really matters to me. I want to constantly teach them kindness. Go back to that episode. Kindness really matters to me. It's one of my core values. So when I am in a relationship, whether it's with my husband, with a friend, whoever I'm working with, there needs to be kindness involved. Whether I'm giving a kindness, receiving a kindness, or both, there has to be that matters to me. So if I am in a situation where I don't feel the kindness, that's an exit for me, right? That's a clear sign of you are not being served by this situation. So if you're at the point of this episode and you think, okay, I get that being myself and discovering myself is important, but like, how do I do that? How do I really figure it out? Now, I just gave you the example of discovering your core values. Reach out to me if you want to have a conversation. This is what I do for my clients. I help them figure out what's important to them, and then we go in the direction of what's important to them. And it pays off. It completely pays off because, like I said, if you tend to your needs, everything gets better. If you actually follow your own lead, everything gets better. And not that things are terrible, but there is something magical about clicking in with your true self and being led by that person. If you're curious about this and you want to dive more into who am I, let's talk. I can definitely help you. But as far as something to take with you today, do a life assessment. And make it basic. I'm not telling you to go take one of those giant personality tests and career advancement or career tests. Just do a little checklist based on your personal relationships, the job that you have, the environment that you're in, and take note. Just start with awareness. What feels really, really good in your life? Who feels really, really good to be around? And then do the opposite. What is in your life that doesn't feel super good? Is there a person that when you're around them, the vibe is weird, the energy is sucked out of you? What about what happens when you wake up in the morning knowing you're going to work? Are you excited to go to work, or are you dreading it? Notice these things. Just take a little note on what parts of your life are really life-giving and energy-giving and exciting to you and feel good. Just don't overthink it. Just feel good. And what pieces of your life feel off or not right, or maybe you've ignored the off and not right, and maybe this is your chance to really start paying attention to that. Maybe there are things in your life that you have been accepting because you've gotten into this rhythm and you just think that's the way to be. Maybe you haven't considered the fact that things don't have to always be that way, that finding your true self and discovering what is meant for you and what is not meant for you has just felt too scary or too hard. What if it doesn't have to be that way? Maybe this is your eye-opening moment to think, I could do things differently. I can choose different choices. Sometimes we need that reminder that you can be led by your own passions, your own intuitions, your own energy. And if something isn't serving you anymore, you don't need it. You can find another way because you deserve to live and thrive and love your life. Because, as I always say, your needs matter because you matter. If you want to talk about this, let me know. Visit ablifecoaching.com. You can reach out to me through Instagram at ablifecoaching. I'm here for you. This is what I do. You deserve a good life. So I will leave you here. Thanks for being here and for listening. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Needy and Normal podcast. If you liked this episode, share it generously. I would so appreciate it if you would take a quick moment to leave me a review and click that subscribe button so you won't miss an episode. For information about coaching together, visit ablifecoaching.com.